was gonna do Jeopardy, but if your review packets aren't finished, we will do that first. Did you have a good weekend though? Do anything? Nothing. Stayed home all weekend, sat in your room, did nothing? Did something? What'd you do? You what? Your elf came? Did your elf come at the same time every year? Whenever your tree is done. So you just got your tree done this weekend or whatever, and then he came? Very cool. Gerald always comes the day after Thanksgiving. So he's been hanging out in the boat this morning. It's not a boat, it's a shuttlecock for a loom, an antique shuttlecock for a loom, but it looks like a giant canoe. So I guess he's going for a ride. I don't know. What's your elf's name? Christopher Poppins? Is that what you said?
Christopher Poppins.
Say the last part again.
Christopher Poppins.
Poppins. Okay. All right. That's a good name for an elf, I guess. Yeah. How long has he always been at your house or? Very cool. Been the family elf for some time. The only time that he didn't show up the day after Thanksgiving was the year my family was visiting China. And we did Thanksgiving dinner over there with our friend that was living there at the time. And when the boys got up the day after Thanksgiving, there was a note like stuck to the outside of her sliding glass door that went out to her back like her balcony. And it said that it was written by some elf named like Mingling or something, some Chinese elf. And it said like Gerald doesn't have the right paperwork to get into China. So he asked me to let you know that he'll meet you when you get home. So I mean he was on top of things. I appreciate that. Very cool. Is your elf a no-touch elf? Yeah, Gerald's a no-touch elf too. I've seen some people that like carry their elves around. I'm like, that's weird. It's weird. I always heard the magic is gone. Touch your elf. Well, good. You got your tree up and your elf came, so now it feels a little more Christmassy. We're working, getting there. Good deal. Excellent. Yeah, I'm gonna have a very, very busy weekend and a very busy like 2 weeks. So you were in AC/DC? They're coming in August, did you know? We got tickets. We're going, Drew and Jason and I are going. I'm very excited. This should be fun. Should be lots of fun. I gotta see them while they're all still kicking because they are getting old. So I'm looking forward to it though. Now I've got I'm having a party here this Friday. And then Saturday, Blair's sister's graduating nursing school today, so they're having her party on Saturday. So I will swing by that. And then I've also got a friend dancing in the Nutcracker. I'm going to try and go see her for that. And then Sunday, we have an angel tree at church, where you take a little tag and you buy a gift. And it goes for Emmaus House, which is the Episcopal Outreach Ministry for the Diocese of Atlanta. It's down in Atlanta. And they serve the community that lives in some of the like lowest income parts of Atlanta. And so we're going down there with the youth group to wrap up Christmas presents for the kids that we've collected for. So like this year they wanted a lot of backpacks. We bought between my mom and us, we bought 5 backpacks to take down there. So and we put stuff in them because why not? So like my mom put a water bottle in hers and water bottles, and she got 2, she put water bottles, and I got like a journal and a pen and like a deck of playing cards and stuff like that to take down there for them so they can have Christmas. We'll always do an angel tree, but we don't usually go down to wrap, so this will be new for us. I've gone down to make sandwiches before, but not for wrapping. They do that. They'll take like loaves of bread and they'll make like an assembly line with peanut butter and jelly or ham and cheese or turkey or whatever. And then everybody just slaps the sandwiches together. You put them right back in the same bag that the bread came out of. And that way, when they have the kids come back to their after school programs, they get a snack, they get a sandwich for a snack. So it's a good ministry. They do really good work. They've brought food down to their pantry before and whatever. So this will be the first time for wrapping them. I like gift wrapping those. That should be fun. There's Evan. Good morning.
Good morning.
How are ya?
Good.
All right, man. You have a good weekend?
Yeah.
All right, very good. I'm speaking a little quietly today because I have a little touch of laryngitis. My doctor gave me some steroids because otherwise you guys were not going to get any kind of review because I could not speak at all yesterday morning. I had like no voice when I woke up. So anyway, bear with me because I'm going to be a little quiet. All right, so what we're going to do today is we are going to roll through our lesson real fast. It's pretty short. We're going to go through it very, very quickly. And then we're going to do exam reviews. So have you finished your midterm review packet or are you still working through it? You finished it? Okay, great. I'm working through it. Okay, do you have it with you? Okay, we'll make sure you have, when we start, if you don't have paper and a pencil or something, wave at me. Because we're going to go through the packet then, because they haven't finished theirs either. And if they're not finished with that, I'd rather make sure we have all the correct answers in that before we like play Jeopardy or something. So I'm going to go ahead and we'll go through that. And if you don't have your packet with you, you can just write down the answers in order. And that should help. Okay? Everybody ready? We're going to roll. We're going to roll quickly. So we're talking about classification, taxonomy, fossil record, history of life. Taxonomy is one of my favorite things. So like I said, we're rolling through quickly. So this guy right here, this is Carl Linnaeus. And he's one of my favorite dudes because he came up with a great process for how to start categorize. If you don't categorize something, it's hard to compare and contrast it with other things, right? So you have a pine tree. How is the pine tree related to the oak tree? Well, they're both trees, but they're very different, right? A pine tree is an evergreen. It doesn't drop its needles. It's not deciduous, where an oak tree is going to drop leaves and it's going to make acorns. So they're related, but how? So we found a way of classifying things that shows how they are related to one another. And I think it's really cool. And he came up with the process that we call binomial nomenclature. Does anybody know what that means? Binomial nomenclature. We break it down a little. What does bi mean? It's a prefix. You know what bi means? How many wheels are on a bicycle? Two. So bi means? Two, right? Okay. And then you see nom in both words. Do you know what nom would mean? So that's name. So it's a two naming way of naming. Binomial nomenclature is a two name way of naming. So what that means is each species is assigned a two-part scientific name. And the goal of a system like this is to organize living things into groups that have biological meaning. Okay, so here's why this is important. All right, so where I grew up in Virginia, we had this weed that would grow in the yard. And I remember as a little kid, I thought it was cool because the stalk and the stems on the weed were like a bright pinkish purple color. And then the leaves were green, but then the berries were these like almost black looking like berries. But we had a pool in my backyard and there was some sand around the edges that my parents would use kind of like, they dug out the pool. So they leveled it and put sand. But if I crushed the berries in the sand, it would turn the sand purple, like a pink purple. And I thought it was super pretty. But we called that weed an inkberry because it had like ink in it, right? But then when I moved down here, I found out that same weed people call a pokeberry. So how do we know, if I'm talking about inkberry and you're talking about pokeberry, how do I know we're talking about the same organism? Like there's no way to know if there's just cultural names in different languages, regional names. So if you're calling something its scientific name using binomial nomenclature, which would be its genus and its species, then I know we're talking about the same organism. So that's why it's important. So over time, Linnaeus's original classification system expanded to include 7 hierarchical taxa, taxa being a plural for a taxon, which is the word in taxonomy, which is a way of categorizing. So taxa is categories. So 7 categories in a hierarchy. So going backwards from the most narrow to the widest, you've got species, genus, family, order, class, phylum, kingdom, and domain. And you guys know, because we did it before, domain, kingdom, phylum, class, order, family, genus, species, going from the widest to the most narrow. So this is just backwards, but it's the same list, right? You recognize that list from back at the beginning of biology? There it is. So here they are again. Now, what's that? The moss rose. You see? Okay. There is its scientific name, Rosa galacea. Its genus is in its scientific name because it's genus and species. And you can see right there where it says genus, Rosa, right? And then its species is going to be Galacea. So Rosa galacea is a moss rose. And it is part of the genus Rosa, the family Rosaceae, the order Rosales, the class Dicotyledonnae, the phylum Angiospermae, and then the kingdom Plantae. And that's how we can categorize things. So we can see how it's related. So you can see it's related more closely to the other organisms in its genus than it is to the other organisms in its kingdom, right? The narrower you get, the more close the relationship. All right, this one's fun. 10 ridiculous scientific names. And I mean ridiculous, some of these are. Oh, I always get commercial.
System and precision wells.
Until the mid-1700s, the names we used to identify living things were a bit of a mess. At the time, a lot of scientific names were trying to both identify and describe species, and some of them were like 12 words long. In 1753, a Swedish botanist named Carl Linnaeus tried to fix this problem by developing a simpler two-word system that we still use today. Every species has both a generic name, what we'd call a genus name, followed by its trivial or species name. He argued that it didn't really matter what the name was, as long as every species got a unique label and everybody agreed to use it. And that's why today, the rules for naming a new species aren't very strict. If you find it, you get to name it. Pretty much anything goes, as long as you use the Latin alphabet and the name isn't too offensive. So if you ever happen to discover a new species, you want to name it after your favorite sandwich, or Game of Thrones character, or your childhood pet, you probably can. But if you're really struggling to come up with your dream species name, here are a few ideas. One way to name a species is by going with a clever translation and maybe a bit of poetic flair, like the salt-loving bacteria whose Latin name means traveler of the void. It earned that name by surviving in outer space for 2 years. In 2009, researchers sent samples of the bacteria to the International Space Station, or more specifically to the outside of the space station. All of the samples were exposed to the vacuum of space. Some of them were totally shielded from the sun's rays, some of them were only partially shielded, and some were completely exposed. The bacteria that got the full blast of the sun's radiation all died, but some of the ones that were partially shielded made it. And almost all of the bacteria that were totally protected survived. Next, we have Ostodax muciflorus, aka the bone-eating snot flower, which is exactly what it sounds like. The muciflorus is a pink marine worm that somehow resembles both a frilled flower and something you'd find in a used tissue. These guys live in whale carcasses on the Atlantic Ocean floor, where the females anchor themselves within the bones of the whale's large skeleton. There they secrete a special acid that dissolves the bone so they can suck it in through their skin, since
Come here, John. Come on. Yeah, Mazda. Oh, goodness. Okay, sorry.
since they lack both mouths and guts, and they really do make themselves at home in these bones. They send their flower-like gill plumes out the side of the bone to collect oxygen. They also send out a long tube-like oviduct. Researchers think they use the oviduct to shoot out fertilized eggs that can then disperse through the water. If you're not into descriptive translations, you could try a solid pun, or just wordplay in general. Like how, when researchers identified a new genus of small brown and yellow fungus beetles, they dubbed it jelly, after the Latin gelatis, meaning congeal or jelly. This made a kind of sense since the tiny round beetles eat and therefore spend most of their time living on slime molds. The researchers then went on to name 5 of its species jelly bean, jelly belly, jelly donut, jelly roll, and jellyfish. Probably as close as they could. On the other hand, if you've got a new species waiting for a name, you could always just name it after a celebrity. That's what German entomologist and spider expert Peter Jaeger did in 2008 when he identified a new type of Malaysian spider and named it Heteropida David Bowie. Not unlike Aladdin Sane, the spider is
David
big,
Bowie.
bright-haired, and fabulous. David Bowies can be 15 to 25 millimeters long, and their whole bodies are covered in yellow, orange, and red hair. They're also one of over 200 species named by Jaeger, and not the first inspired by a celebrity. Many of the species Jaeger works with are rare, endangered, and easily overlooked. He estimates there may only be around 500 David Bowies left on their island habitat, and he hoped that by giving them a flashy celebrity name, they might pull some headlines of their own and draw public attention to conservation efforts. Plus, there's the whole Ziggy Stardust and the Spiders from Mars thing, too. While some researchers may name a species after a celebrity to celebrate that person's achievements, others may just notice a particular resemblance between their species and a famous person. In 2011, when curator Brian Lesser began describing a previously unknown species of Australian horsefly from an old museum collection, he was immediately mesmerized by the fly's spectacular lower abdomen, bedazzled with dense golden hair. What a glamorous bum, he thought. One might even call it bootylicious. So he named it Scaptia beyonceae, after Queen Bey herself. Golden booty or not, most people don't appreciate the 4,000 plus species of horseflies in this world, probably because their bites really hurt and it's really annoying when one keeps buzzing past your eyeball. But horseflies are actually quite useful citizens of Earth. Adult horseflies are important pollinators. They feed on nectar and move pollen around. Only the females bite, but most of them are anatogenous, which means they can't properly reproduce without first eating a hearty blood snack. You can't really blame a girl for taking care of herself. I'm pretty sure Beyonce even has some songs about that. Then there's the story of paleontologist David Legg, who saw the claw-like front appendages of a 505 million-year-old lobster-like fossil and immediately thought of Edward Scissorhands. The new genus Kootenai honored both the place where the fossil was found, Kootenai National Park in British Columbia, and referenced the animal's most distinctive feature with chella.
It's not just a bird.
Foil wrapped.
Really fresh.
Real ingredients.
From the farm. Fresh every day.
Responsibly right. Without that bad stuff. It's magic happens.
Yeah, that looks good.
100% yum.
Literally mouse
Tasty.
deliciousness. Observability is about real world impact, where it counts.
So we can innovate faster.
Latin word for claw. And the species name Depi honored Johnny Depp, the film's sharp-fingered star. At about 4 centimeters long, Kootenai depi was relatively small and probably used its big claws to capture or scavenge for prey along shallow sea bottoms. It's essentially the precursor to the arthropods we have today, like crabs and scorpions, as well as spiders, centipedes, and insects. Now, if celebrities aren't your thing, you could always name a newly found species after your favorite fictional character. Since sciencey people often enjoy science fiction, it probably shouldn't come as a surprise that the Harry Potter, Tolkien, and Star Wars fandoms are already well represented. For example, meet the J.K. Rowling-inspired Ambulex Dementor, kind of cockroach wasp. These wasps have the charming habit of zombifying their prey, the way hooded guards of Azkaban suck the souls right out of their victims. Native to Thailand, Dementor wasps stab roaches in the belly, injecting them with a mind-controlling venom that leaves them technically able to move, but unable to control their own bodies. That makes it easy for the wasp to haul them away and chow down, meeting a fate that only the worst Death Eater deserves. In 2007, paleontologists digging in Morocco unearthed a fossilized skull fragment, discovering a new, large, carnivorous dinosaur. The fragment was mostly of the upper skull, but it included an eye socket. They named it Sauroniaps because, in the words of study leader Andrea Cow, the idea of a predator that is physically known only as its fierce eye reminded me of Sauron. Aren't nerds the best? The fossil suggests the animal was a toothy, two-legged terror, probably as big as a T-Rex, and just as scary as Sauron himself, although without more fossils, it's hard to say for sure. Broad and thick with a distinct lump on its forehead, a Sauroniaps skull looks a bit different than other two-legged dinosaurs from that area. Researchers think males may have used their head lumps to compete for ladies with some good old-fashioned headbutting. Now, Sauron's not the only hobbit enemy getting props. There's also the aptly named genus Smog, which contains a group of 8 medium-sized African girdled lizards. As members of the Chordilidae family, they're noted for their well-armored bodies, roughly scaled tails, and large spines. They are basically mini dragons. Smog species are insectivores, give birth to live young, and are bigger than most members of the taxonomic family. They live in deep and narrow rock crevices, or in one case, tight underground burrows, which makes the name even more appropriate, since Tolkien probably named his dragon Smog after the German word for squeezing through a hole. So many layers of meaning here. And finally, no list of fun names would be complete without a Star Wars reference, and my favorite has got to be Han Solo. Not the character. Well, maybe the character, but the actual species. It's a type of trilobite, a very old, fossilized group of extinct marine arthropods, and its official scientific name is just straight up Han Solo. Researcher Samuel Turvey does admit that his friends dared him to name something after a Star Wars character, but the name is actually very clever. For one thing, the fossil was discovered in the Hunan province of China, and the Han people are a large Chinese ethnic group. The animal also happens to be the only known member of its family hence the solo. Trilobites were also diverse, widely distributed, and if you can find one, they're often nearly as well preserved as Harrison Ford and Carbonite. These are just a few examples of species with clever, amusing names. So if you ever have the opportunity to name a species of your own, don't be afraid to get creative. Thanks for watching this SciShow.
So some of them are really fun, right? They don't all have to be boring and hard to understand. Some of them are very interesting. So this is just some examples here of where you may find these types of organisms from these various kingdoms. And it shows you different ways to categorize. So our Linnean taxonomy has changed and evolved over time. So this is kind of where we are now, where we have bacteria and archaea, and then we have Protista, plantae, fungi, and mammalia. And in the past, I'll show you, but in the past there have been some others, but it kind of shows you where you find animalia, where you find plantae, and whether they are prokaryotic, eukaryotic, whether they're unicellular or multicellular, and how they feed, whether they're autotrophic, heterotrophic. Some are both. You see that we have some eubacteria and some Protista that have both heterotrophic and autotrophic organisms. What does an autotroph mean? Makes its own food, like a tree or a plant or something of that effect. Heterotroph means has to get its food from eating something else, right? Are you an autotroph or a heterotroph? Heterotroph, you're a heterotroph. All right, so here are other ways to categorize. So the 6-kingdom system of classifications is Eubacteria, Archaebacteria, Protista, fungi, plantae, and mammalia. Now, this 5-kingdom, this is what your parents and I grew up with. We grew up with this one, Monera, Protista, plantae, fungi, and mammalia. This is what we're used to. Now we've taken Monera and we've kind of subdivided it into Eubacteria and Archaebacteria. So another way to do it is kind of lump everybody in with eukaryote. This second one here, this 6-kingdom one, the one that's listed here, this is the main one that we're using these days. But if you're talking to your parents and they're like, I don't remember this, I remember Monera, Protista, plantae, fungi, and mammalia, that's why. It has changed. It has since evolved. So what does the fossil record show us? From the fossil record, paleontologists learn about the structure of ancient organisms, their environment, and the way in which they lived. Relative dating allows paleontologists to determine whether a fossil is older or younger than other fossils. Relative dating involves things like rock layers. Like if you find something in the same layers, then you know that it lived at the same time, right? If you find things in one of them in an older layer and one of them in a younger layer of rock, you know that the one in the younger layer came after the one in the older layer. Often, not always, but often. That is relative dating. Relative dating can tell you if organisms cohabitated on Earth, or at least coexisted on Earth at the same time, but it doesn't give you an exact age of a fossil. Radiometric dating uses a proportion of radioactive to stable isotopes to calculate the age of a sample. So this has to do with radioactive decay. So there are some elements on our periodic table that over time will change, and it has to do with their neutrons, and the mass of them will change, and we know the rate at which they change, and we can take that information and compare the non-radioactive versions of elements within something and the radioactive versions and tell exactly how old something is. This is much more precise. And then we have our geologic time scale, which is what's in this graphic right here. And it's based on both relative and absolute dating. So radiometric is absolute, relative is, fossil layers and things like that. And then we divide time into eons, eras, periods. Which one's biggest? Eons, eras, or periods? Eons is biggest, eras, then periods. If you look here, these are all periods. The Mississippian, Triassic, Jurassic, these right here are eras. Paleozoic era, Mesozoic era, Cenozoic era, and then eons are much bigger. Oh, did I read? Oh, so building mountains, opening coastlines, changing climates, and geological forces have altered habitats of living organisms repeatedly throughout Earth's history. So in turn, the actions of living organisms over time have changed conditions in the land, water, atmosphere of planet Earth. All right, now, how old is old? So we think Earth is about 4.5 billion years old. So now, if you were to take that 4.5 billion years and make it into a year, what time on the clock do you think life would begin on Earth? Like if midnight, 12:01 is the start of your 4.5 billion years, and if 11:59 p.m. is your end of your 4.5 billion years, where do you think life would come in? About what time of day? What would you guess? 10 p.m. a.m.? 10 p.m.? What do you think? Well, now, what do you think? 9 p.m.? Okay, when do you think humans are going to enter the picture? What time? 10 p.m.? What do you think? 11 p.m.? What do you think? 11? All right, let's see. Drop the pennies.
We live for the moment.
Ah, yes.
That changes history.
Huh.
Incredibly busy day here.
Yeah.
Life. With an estimated 3.8 billion years of existence and evolution on Earth, it's an odd thing indeed. So how did we get here? And what would the Earth's 4.5 billion year timeline look like compressed into a normal day of 24 hours? The story begins early in the morning, around 4 a.m., with the rise of the first simple single-celled organisms. However, these organisms are destined to spend quite some time alone. At 1 p.m., a simple cell engulfs another, creating a symbiotic relationship and the first eukaryotic cells or cells with internal organs. At 6:30 p.m., these cells begin to form colonies, and thus the first multicellular life develops. But it isn't until 8:30 p.m. that sea plants appear, and 20 minutes later we suddenly see animal life erupt in an explosion of inventiveness. Jellyfish, the first true vertebrates, trilobites. Incredible diversification begins to take place. And just before 10 p.m., plants begin to appear on land, followed by land mammals. By 1024, the Earth is covered in carboniferous forests, and the first winged insects appear. Many reptiles dominate the land with less than an hour left, but a mass extinction event allows dinosaurs to storm the scene and remain until 11:41 p.m., when they too suddenly vanish. And so begins the Age of Man. In the last few minutes, apes split from the old world monkeys, and with only 1 minute and 17 seconds left before midnight, humans emerge. All of the recorded human history fits within a few seconds, an individual life lasting barely an instant, all a culmination of 3.8 billion years of life. This ASAP Science video was made possible by this.
So, really late, right? We're so new. We're so new. All right, so here are your answers to go over these. So, fossil formation, crocodile sinks in the water and layers of what cover him up? Anybody know? Sediment. Sediments harden and become rock, and the remains of the crocodile become, yes, Everly, fossilized. Yeah. In the following sentence, is it true or false? Scientists use the age of fossils to learn how organisms changed over time. Everly. Go. Picture shows layers of rock in a canyon wall. Some layers of rock have the youngest fossils. Those are going to be right there at the top. That's where you're going to find the youngest. We're going to use this word bank here to fill in our sentence. If no members of a species are still alive, then the species is what? Everly again. Extinct. The calendar of Earth's history is called the... Everly's ready. Go for it. Yeah, geologic time scale. Circle the letter of the sentence that is true about Earth's history. Which one is it? Which is true? For number 5. It's going to be A. Fossil record is made up of all the fossils that have been collected. All right, is the following sentence true or false? All living things that became extinct left behind fossils. Everly. False just says. Oh, and that one too. I forgot. That was also true. Sorry, I didn't click it. Yes, true. And it's true that it's false. Correct. False. So your lines would look like so. Climate change can lead to mass extinction. Mining fossils is questions about Earth's history, and sometimes slow, sometimes fast is the speed of evolution. Okay, here's your Unit 5 test topics. Be sure that you study. You have a test. When is your test due?
Next Tuesday.
not Tuesday. Does anybody know when it's due? It's due Monday, not Tuesday. Because what are you doing Tuesday? You're coming here on Tuesday and you're taking your final exam. So this is due Monday. Get it done a day early. I have to get it graded and get it back to you so you know if you got something wrong, that's something you need to study more for your midterm, right? You don't want to not be studying something that you don't understand. All right, so now I'm going to close this and I'm going to tell, yes, I know, I'm going to tell this to share this. We're going to work through this, all right? If you have it with you, go ahead and get it out. If you don't have it with you, that's fine. There's paper in the middle of the table if you don't have paper. If there's something you don't know, or if you're not sure, just write the answers in a straight line as we go. All right. Kilogram is equal to how many grams? 1,000. Yes. Your what variable is what you keep the same? What do you keep the same? Your control. The statement, the worm is 2 centimeters long, is what? That's going to be an observation. The maximum number of organisms of a particular species that can be supported by an environment is called the what? What do we call that? Anybody have this one yet? This is your carrying capacity. Make sure you get it written down. All right, so what is used by cells to store energy required for cellular processes? It's a molecule. It's got 3 letters in its name. Does anybody remember? ATP. If I can get it to, there it is, ATP. All life on Earth exists in the what? What's the best answer for that? Do you know? The biosphere is the answer you're looking for. Different forms of a gene are called what? Think about your dragon assignment that you did for fun. You've got a dominant and a recessive. What? What are they? Starts with an A. No? Alleles. Very good. Alleles. That written down? Okay. What type of cells are haploid? Do you remember what haploid means? The diploid means it has all of its pairs of chromosomes. Haploid means it only has half, it only has half the number of chromosomes. It only has one of each pair, half of a set. So what kinds of cells only have half the chromosomes? Not all. Yes, sex cells, gametes. Either answer would be right. Sex cells or gametes. Very good. A group of different species. Be careful when you read this one. Not all members of a species, but a group of different species that live together in a defined area. What do you call that? What do you call a group that's the same species that live in a defined area? That's a population, right? What do you call it if they're different species? That's a community. Taking advantage of naturally occurring variations in organisms to pass on wanted traits to offspring is called what? This is something we do with organisms so that we can create the kind of organisms we want through breeding. What is that? selective breeding. Remember? That's how we got the kind of dogs that we want, kind of crops that we want. Excuse me. I have a tickle. It's the only thing with this laryngitis is it's been a tickle. An observation is made using the sentences. Remember, we said like the worm is 2 centimeters long. You've used your eyes, you've used your senses, you've measured the worm. What is it when you base something on prior knowledge and experience? What's that called? Observation is your sentence, is your, let me tell you this. So let me do it this way. The husky has a very thick coat. That's an observation, right? I can see it has a very thick, warm coat. What does that tell me about the husky? It lives in a cold place, right? What is that called that I just did? Where I said, must live in a cold place, where you did that. That's an inference. You're inferring based on prior knowledge. Which is like, I know that warm coats are needed for cold weather. Therefore, he must be from a cold place. All right, changes in a species over a long period of time is called what? Over a long period of time, changes in a species. That's going to be evolution, right? All right, now we have two steps to turning genetic information into protein, right? Your first step is you make RNA from DNA. And then your second step is that RNA in the ribosome is coded for amino acids, right? So what is it called in that first step when the code in DNA is copied into the RNA? What's that first step called? So this first step is transcription. And the way you can remember that is this SCRI. That's like the word scribe. That is somebody who literally like writes down something or copies down something as a scribe. So it's being transcribed. It's making a copy. If you can remember that scribes copy, that's what they're for, right? So a scribe is a person that makes copies. Like a scribe would be somebody who like maybe made copies of scripture back in the day so that everybody could have their own copy of scripture. So that's in the scripture. There's the word again, script. Also, your doctor writes a prescription. It's the same word. It has to do with writing. Isn't it escribe in Spanish? Isn't that writing? It's the same thing, right? So the process by which DNA is copied is transcription. What's it called when it is made, when the RNA then is made into protein? It makes proteins, sorry. That one's translation, right? So transcription comes first, translation comes second. Appendix is an example of what kind of a structure? What do we call, what's an appendix? Where is it? Where's your appendix? You know? Kind of at the bottom of your large intestine. It just kind of, well, I don't have one anymore. It kind of hangs out down here. You don't need it because we don't use it anymore. It's an old evolutionary leftover. What do we call those structures? Vestigial structures. Vestigial. Wisdom teeth are another good example of vestigial structure. The DNA in a typical prokaryotic cell has a certain kind of shape and is found where? So not a eukaryote. What's a eukaryote? A cell that has what? Membrane-bound nucleus. Are you a eukaryote or a prokaryote? That's an easy one. You are a eukaryote. You have a nucleus in your cells that is bound by a membrane. Prokaryotes are older. They're more simple. They don't have a membrane-bound nucleus. So their genetic material or their DNA, if it's not in the nucleus, where is it then? It's floating around in the, what's the medium inside a cell? In the cytoplasm. And what shape is it? It's a circular DNA in the cytoplasm. Be sure you have that written down. Huh. Hmm. Okay. What is an approach to seeking knowledge that involves forming and testing a hypothesis in a logical, systematic way? What do we call that? That one is scientific method. That's what we call that. It's an approach to seeking knowledge that involves forming and testing a hypothesis in a logical, systematic way. What is a trait that helps an organism survive and reproduce? What is that husky? What do we call? So the husky has a nice warm coat, right? Because the husky lives up in the snowy parts of the world where it's very cold, right? That's what they're for, pulling sleds and things like that. They love it. They love being out in the cold. They love pulling sleds. They live for it. All right. So that coat allows them to survive and reproduce, and it is an adaptation. All right, this is the fun one. Who believed that the use or disuse of a structure or behavior would cause the organism to gain or lose traits over generations? This is the guy with the, do you remember the giraffes? Giraffes stretch their necks, so therefore their babies were born with larger necks. Who was that guy? Do you remember? That was Lamarck. Oh, Lamarck. Remember how memed he was? People still meme Lamarck these days because that was kind of crazy. But it was important because he's the one who said, oh, there is a relationship to structure and survivability. Oh, goodness. Let me get it. Let me grab a piece of gum or something to keep. All right. Darwin's idea of how evolution occurred. What did he say was the mechanism for evolution? 2 words. This is what we tie this to Darwin. This is Darwin's thing. Natural selection. Remember? Natural selection. Okay, what are those little molecules that are the building blocks of proteins? What do we call them? It's what the RNA codes for. You remember? Remember? You get the little codon, 3 letters. You did it as an activity, right? And you had to put them together, like your sentence made your protein. And each of the little blocks were words. What were the words? What did they stand for? They're the building blocks of proteins, amino acids. Okay, this is one of those ones that's on every midterm, every final, in all 4 subjects I teach. A hypothesis is an idea that can be tested. Remember that hypotheses are not proved or disproved. In order for a hypothesis to be considered, it must be possible to be what and repeatable, or what? It has to be repeatable, and it has to be either supported or rejected and supported. You can do them either way. You can also say accepted or not accepted. You can say accepted and rejected. Those are fine. Just never proved or disproved. If you write proved or disproved, you're going to get it wrong. If you write something like supported or accepted, that's going to be fine. But if you give me disproved or proved, you're going to be wrong. All right? Okay. What's the correct order for the organization of life? All right, there's your word bank. What's going to come first? Atoms, then.
Molecule.
Yep, then. Cells. Cells make up
Tissues.
Tissues make up organs. Organs make up organ systems. And systems make up an organism. Be sure you have that. Hey, do you remember the mnemonic for this one? It's about King Henry. What did he do? He died unusually, drinking chocolate milk. So King is for Kilo. Oh, they're going backwards. Sorry. There you go. King Henry died unusually, drinking chocolate milk. Kilo hectodeca unit, decicentimilli. If you spell milli with two I's, I'm not going to mark it wrong, but I am going to correct it. That's probably the most common mistake for this question. All right, this one is the one about King Philip. We just had King Henry. King Philip. Dear King Philip, actually. Do we remember what Dear King Philip did? Dear King Philip came over for what? Good soup, right? So domain, kingdom, phylum, class, order, family, genus, species. All right, in DNA, what pairs with A or adenine? In DNA, what pairs with adenine? You know. Thymine, T, right. What pairs with C or cytosine? Guanine, very good. What pairs with T? Obviously it's A. And what pairs with G? C. Now, RNA. What pairs with adenine in RNA? It's not thymine. What is it? Uracil. Very good. And then we have C goes with G. A goes with T. And C. I'm sure you've got those. All right. Mutualism is a relationship where both species benefit. Commensalism is a relationship where one species benefits and the other is not affected. Predation is a relationship where one organism kills and eats another. Parasitism is a relationship where one benefits and the other is harmed. And competition is a relationship between organisms that strive for the same resources in the same place. All right, now if we had to label the organisms in this picture as producer, consumer, or decomposer, and then as autotroph or heterotroph, is the chicken a producer, consumer, or decomposer? He's a consumer, and he's a heterotroph because he's a consumer. All consumers are heterotrophs. Now, how about the chicken of the woods? That's a fungus. So it's a what? Is it a producer, a consumer, or a decomposer? It's a decomposer, and because it's a decomposer, it's getting its energy from some other living thing, so it must be a heterotroph. And the chickweed is a plant, so is it a producer, consumer, or decomposer? It's a producer, and it is obviously an autotroph because producers are autotrophs. All right, if you were to give an example of homologous structures, a good example might be a bat wing and a dolphin flipper. Similar structure, different function, right? Similar structure. Analogous, a good example would be a bat wing and a bee wing. Not similar structure, but similar function. You can remember H goes with S. Homologous is about structure. And analogous is about function. So HSAF. You could do, what could you do for HSAF? What mnemonic could you use? Happy Saturdays are fun. HSAF. Right? All right, you only got 1 minute, so I'm just going to show you where these go. Weather is what you get. Climate is what you expect. Now, this is one a lot of people missed on the test when it was on there. Give an example of a sex-linked trait or disorder. A good example would be something like color blindness, because it's on the X chromosome. What can cause cells to produce the wrong proteins? A mutation. Your 3 domains are bacteria, archaea, and eukarya. You get bacteria for the kingdom there, and then you get archaea for the kingdom here. That's pretty easy, right? And then these are going to be protista, plantae, fungi, and animalia. Where it says autotrophs producers, it's got to be plants. Where it says chemoautotrophs and decomposers, that's your fungi. Animalia are your heterotrophs and composers. Consumers, sorry, I can't speak. All right, I'm just gonna click these so you can see them all because it's time to move on. But you can come back and watch this, right? And you can review this, review. These are good examples for these short essay questions. And this, all these, no, all these. Oops, those didn't click like they're supposed to. It's going to look a little different. And you see this one, so be sure you know the process. Also know how to complete a Punnett square. Remember how to do that? All right, you're good. Study. If you study your midterm